Afternoon, everyone. I'm Tori Tasker, Senior Programs and Operations Officer from the Australian Space Agency. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. The Adelaide team are currently here on Kaurna land and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here with us today. Welcome to the Australian Space Agency's launch of the Moon to Mars Trailblazer Program. Today, I'm also joined by Campbell Pegg, our Moon to Mars manager, Pete Hunter and Helena Murik-Nezik from Oz Industry. And just to note, the session today will be recorded and distributed on various digital agency platforms. The session today will be split into two parts. We have our program overview and our project proposal overview. Today's webinar will run for approximately 3 hours, though we may not take up all of that time. In a moment, we will welcome Moon to Mars manager Campbell Pegg from the team for an explanation on the program and the project proposal process. We're going to finish each part of today with a few questions from the audience. And you can do this by logging onto slido.com and entering the event code #Trailblazer. There's also a second Slido opened for sharing your contact details, and this is #TB-bit. This is optional, however, it's a good option if you'd like to make contact with anyone in the call today for any potential collaborations. We'll have 2 Q&As after each part of the session. If you don't get to your question, there will be some contact details at the end of the presentation to take note of as well. So it's my pleasure to now welcome Campbell Pegg to the virtual stage.
Hello, and welcome everyone to the Trailblazer program. And as thank you very much to Tori for that kind introduction as well. Just a reminder, there is Slido as Tori has said. So please jump onto Slido to ask the questions. We will be answering them. We'll be answering them in the Q&A sessions as they come. So yes, my name is Campbell Pegg. I'm the program manager for the Trailblazer program, and I'm happy to show you the program today as it stands and give you all the details that most of you will be looking for. Just to note, I won't be sort of explaining much more beyond that than what is in the guidelines. This is just to support and give you the opportunity to ask questions and also collect some of the feedback from this side as well. So let's get started. But before we do, I wanted to bring you to this craft, and this is the Orion spacecraft. I was lucky enough to actually work on it for about a year, and the reason why I'm bringing it to the attention to this craft is because this craft is actually going to take humans around the moon, and most likely a stepping stone to landing humans on the moon this decade. What a lot of people may or may not know is that this is actually between NASA and the European Space Agency. So the top half is actually generated by NASA and the bottom is done by ESA. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because NASA and ESA has formed a sort of a trusted partnership. They must both succeed for this mission to occur. They know that the service module, which is primarily a lot of propulsion system, that has to work for the humans to get to the moon. And NASA is obviously accommodating a lot of the astronauts and doing a lot of the systems that are in the command module that are at the top as well. So this is a trusted partnership. And this didn't just happen last year. This has been over 50 years, them forming it. And with that, they're able to partake in a major exploration missions and advancing both their agencies and obviously humankind. So this is a fantastic project to be looking at, and the reason why I'm bringing it is because of that trusted partnership aspect. And trusted partnerships, if you want to involve into exploration, you must be able to form this. So the biggest question is, where in Australia, where can we form these sort of trusted partnerships? And we've done a lot of research internally with the roadmaps team. We've done a lot of work over the past year and a half with NASA and multiple international space agencies around where does Australia have that critical capability that we could become a trusted partner. And there were 3 areas: the communications, exploration communications, foundation services, and also health services. And if you look at it, a lot of it's based on our remoteness. We are a remote country, so because we're remote, we found some very unique solutions. And the one I want to bring attention to today is foundation services. Question is, what is it, and why is it so important for us? So Foundation Services, this is the operational activities that support exploration missions to build towards and eventually maintain and sustain an off-Earth presence. Now, what does this mean? It's basically the industrial services for exploration missions. A lot of agencies out there are investing a lot of time in the individual items, habitats, in situ resource utilization items, landers, getting there and back. So there's a whole bunch of entities that everyone's sort of focusing on. The big gap that we see and the capability that we have is how do we put that all together? How does it actually work in a pure operational sense? And this is something that we can leverage from the mining sector because we have exactly that capability in the mines. And it has to be reliable, it has to be safe. So some of the examples of what Foundation Services are: monitoring and inspection, planning and logistics, civil construction, material transport and cargo handling, remote maintenance, and component manufacturing assembly. So there are really immense areas that we could work into, and a lot of the mission that we have today is this sort of first step in becoming a trusted partner for future exploration missions. Now, it takes a long time. As I said, it's taken ESA and NASA around 50 years to get to this point. We should be a bit quicker because of the commercialization and the entities, but in essence, this is the first step on that progress to become a trusted partner. So let me run through a little bit of the Moon to Mars mission, as the Moon to Mars initiative, I should say, and then I'll go into the depths of the Trailblazer program, and then we'll go into a Q&A, as we said before. So what are the objectives of the Moon to Mars initiative, which is where the Trailblazer program is fit under? We're here to support the ambitions to join NASA's endeavor to go on to Moon to Mars, accelerate growth and revenue of the jobs and the space sector, build Australian capability and capacity, lifting Australian involvement in national and international supply chains, demonstrate Australian capabilities to the world, and inspire a nation. Now, how is this initiative broken up? We've got 3 programs, which I won't go into full details today. I'll just be focusing on the Trailblazer program. But the first one is the supply chain program. And this is about getting Australian products and services into national and international supply chains. We do have the 5th intake just closed, but we do have a 6th intake that is that's going to close on the 3rd of March 2022. So please apply. And then there is a facilitation funding that should be commencing basically next year, next 2 quarters. We also have the demonstrator program. The feasibility studies have commenced, and we've actually started funding those feasibility studies, if you remember. But the mission grants, are actually open on the 14th of March. The guidelines are open today, so you can have a look at what the guidelines that will assess you on. And then the mission grant applications will close on the 1st of July 2022. So you have around about 6 months for the Trailblazer program. And this is about getting Australian companies into space and building that space heritage that we definitely need. The last one is the Trailblazer program, which I'll go into. But the main aspect is it's open today, so you can apply. Right, the Trailblazer program. So what are the key objectives of this program? First one is to develop Foundation Services rover solution capable of collecting lunar regolith and deliver it to NASA's in situ resource utilization facility. It's also to demonstrate the ability for Australian capability to support international missions. So really that demonstration, we've got to prove to the world we can do things, and inspire the Australian public, which is a key entity. So what is the mission? So typically in a lot of the grant programs that we've set up, we've sort of given you the objectives and you've proposed the mission that sort of fulfill the objectives. This time around, and I'll explain as we go through the program, we've obviously become more detailed on what we exactly want. And that is a lot of it's to do with we need to achieve a certain thing around the agreements that we have with NASA. So let me go through the details of this mission and what sort of work we're expecting to do. But first, before we do any of that, I'd like to show a bit of a video that we've got of the mission to date. So here we go. Now, hopefully you guys hear the sound of this as well. Fantastic. So as you saw there, and I'll go through the objectives and outcomes of the mission, but as you saw there, we're basically getting to the moon on a lander. We're going to be developing a rover to provide lunar regolith to and from the ISAU facility. And I'll go through all the details that we have here, but in essence, that's the basics of what we've got. So the primary mission objectives is firstly to demonstrate and progress Australian Exploration Foundation Services capability with remotely operated and autonomous Australian lunar assets. So demonstrate our our Foundation Services capability. That's one of the key objectives. And the other one is to deliver lunar regolith to the ISAU facility to contribute to NASA's endeavour to go onto the moon and to Mars. They're the two objectives that we have. Now, what we expect at the end of this mission, Australia is recognised as a provider for Exploration Foundation Services capability with a remotely operated and autonomous Australian robotic lunar asset. Australia's Foundation Services automation capability on the lunar surface is demonstrated, and the Australians' ability to safely and effectively manage interoperability between assets deployed on the lunar surface is proven. So that means, you know, we've got something there and we're actually showing that we can do it. The second one is showing our automation capability and ensuring that it is safe and reliable. So as shown by the video, the primary mission here is to conduct this primary task. And we've led from the objectives of the program to the mission objectives and then down to the primary task. And we've been quite specific on what we exactly want. The first one is we need to acquire, transfer, and deliver lunar regolith from a lunar surface to NASA's ISAU facility. And the second part of this task is the task has to be repeatable and providing high levels of reliable autonomy through the task operational phases. So in essence, we develop a rover, put it on the lunar surface, go pick up lunar regolith and bring it back to the ISAU facility. And we do that a few times and getting our autonomy and our reliability up as we do it to demonstrate this. That is the primary mission task that we're actually asking. It's relatively simple, and there is a reason for that. It's one of the simplest exercises we can do to demonstrate this capability. And it's because we have, limitations on the funding and also time frame. So we did not want to get too complicated too quickly. And this is the primary objective, is to do this job. You have scope inside this to do secondary objectives, but they shall not dominate or jeopardize the primary task of the mission. So what does that mean? It basically means, yes, if you want to do different tasks, let's say after or a little bit before or whatever you think is necessary, that's fine. But we shouldn't remember that we need to demonstrate this primary task first. That is the first objective. So if you go off, let's say, for example, once we've done this reliability proof, and then we say, now I'm going to go and explore a few extra things, that's completely fine. What would be not a good step forward is you come in and say, look, I've just touched the lunar surface. Now I'm going to go off and do my thing for the next week. That wouldn't be the way forward. So the primary task is that we need to achieve this reliability while providing lunar regolith. So the agreement with NASA. The agency has signed an agreement with NASA. The agreement is up to the system requirements review at the moment, and it articulates the key responsibility of NASA and the agency to this time. Activities after the system requirements review will be covered in a separate agreement with NASA. This is a very typical process, so both parties can start on the journey. They normally sign it in two agreement forms, so we can actually start that journey off. Without an agreement, it's very hard to commit resources towards any of these missions, so hence you do it in a two-phased approach. But as I said, it's everyone's intention that we would continue on to the second agreement to fulfill this mission. So what is a part of this agreement when it comes to the lander services? Now, one of the key aspects with the agreement is that NASA is to provide the ride to the lunar surface, and we are to provide the rover to provide the lunar regolith to the ISAU facility. So from this side, NASA is to provide this service at no cost to us. Expected through the commercial payload service program, which is in the public domain. It's a maximum of 20 kilos, including the deployment system, getting from the lander down to the lunar surface. That has to be included in the 20 kilos. The launch date is no earlier than 2026, but is expected to be in 2026, 2027. The procurement has still occurred, so the contracts have not been sent out for this 2026-2027 mission, and that gives us a bit of time to actually reframe what we exactly need. So the interface to the rover is expected to be developed over the next year, and this is earmarking that there is work to be done in this area, which the reason why we're bringing the industry consortium along now is so we have the chance to develop that with them. The in-situ resource utilization facility. So NASA is to also send an ISRU facility to the lunar surface with the rover, so on the same lander. The aim of the facility is to convert lunar regolith into oxygen, and the ISRU facility is actually still in development. So how it's going to receive lunar regolith is still to be determined. How it's going to be collected, what's the mechanisms, all of this is still to be developed, and it should be developed over the next year with the industry partner involved. So that's the very basics of the mission here, explaining a little bit of the agreement and where to do and what NASA is going to be doing. But let's get into the implementation. So basically, what exactly have we got in the guidelines explaining about what is the next stage that's coming here? So the first one is the timeline, which is, I think, the most important. A lot of people want to know. We've broken this program up into two stages, stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 1 is actually is going to be 2 recipients, so 2 grants given out at $4 million each, with a $1 million co-contribution by the industry. And that will go for around about a year. From there, we will actually then we will reduce it down to one consortium, and then that consortium will receive $42 million, and there's expected to have $10 million of co-funding that's coming from here. Stage 1 is approximately a year long, and by stage 1 time is finished, the second agreement should be in place, ready for stage 2. So the reason why we've broken it down into these two parts is these two stages is because we can actually mitigate risk in this method, but it also gives people a lot of opportunity to get the co-funding that is needed to actually get onto the stage 2 as well. And then fully understand the mission that we've got there, and allowing us to also fully understand the consortium that is actually being developed through this stage 2. So there we have it. It's a total of $50 million plus also the co-contribution that is coming through here to deliver this. So some of the key timelines that we have here. The first one is applications close on the 28th of February. So it was very strong intended that we give you approximately 3 months to be able to bid. I understand it's over Christmas, but we really are aiming to give you the reasonable amount of time to actually bid here. And that's because missions require time. The second one is the winners. It's going to be a relatively fast assessment process in April, May. We're looking to announce winners in 2022. And that's primarily so we can make the mission concept review, which is a key milestone that we need to make no later than the 21st of July. So there is a little bit of shiftability on this depending on when the winners are announced. And then they'll be in discussions with the winners once they've come through. The system requirements review, this cannot be budged. This is on the 31st of January. We should have finalized the system requirements review. So the preliminary design review, this is up to the grantee. It's when you should be proposed, but it should be done prior to the ending of stage 1, which is on the 31st of July 2023. Stage 2, applications open on the 1st of May 2023. Then the applications close. Since we've got 2 applicants, that should close relatively quickly after, and then the winners announced. Sorry, in August we said, and the winners announced relatively quickly after. One of the key aspects of the timelines here that probably that people need to consider is that you would need to deliver the rover to the lander around about 8 to 10 months pre-launch. So, but the launch date is not 100% set, and that will be developed over the development of the time of stage 1 with NASA as well. But one thing I know about every mission, launch dates are really dependent on the launcher, and there has to be some adaptability to be able to make these dates through those 2 timeframes. Right, who can apply? So the first stage is open competitive, so anyone can apply within the conditions that we have. and those individuals are incorporated. They must be incorporated in Australia and a publicly funded research organisation. Now, one of the conditions that we're putting on top now, and you've noticed we've done this for the demonstrator program as well, is that if you are a PFRO, you must apply. You must have a joint application with a trading with another entity that is a trading corporation. And this is primarily because we've seen in a lot of programs, the public funded research organisations are coming forward with a very minimal partnership, and we want to sort of give a clear signal that you've got to come with a partnership with a company. So this is it's a really strong point. We've also placed that into the demonstrator program as well. Ineligible, I think you can read that yourself, but basically it's the opposite to what the eligibles are. The stage 2, what we've got here, this is actually closed competitive. So if you have not made it into stage 1, then you cannot bid for stage 2. You must be invited to apply, and you must be successful for a stage 1 grant. So we'll be taking those two winning consortiums and then moving it down to one winning consortium via stage 2. Yes. So eligible activities. Now we've put in to the guidelines what are the eligible activities, and you must state that you will do these activities. Now, some of these activities, but not all of them, some of the activities I've noted here, I really recommend you read both stage 1 and stage 2 guidelines to understand exactly what these activities are. But in essence, you're here to design and plan all activities around the spacecraft mission and phases. So in stage 1, you're looking at the full mission, not just stage 1. Establish and refine requirements for foundation services compatible with other mission interfaces, including environmental requirements. So that means it's going to be your role to obviously sit down and get these requirements sorted to ensure that they're ready for stage 2, and ensure the interfaces between the ISAU facility and also the landers are in place to make sure this mission is a success for the next rounds. Design, develop, and build a functioning rover prototype. So we're expecting a rover prototype by the end of stage 1 that mitigates program risk. So we want some hardware at the end, and that's primarily because we need to visually show. We don't want just paper studies coming out, but at the same time, we've got 2 consortiums here. We want to be able to show that the 2 consortiums have the capability of both going to stage 1. And that might be for future capability that we might want to bring along. So so we could leverage them for risk later on. Establish a review panel for system level reviews as well. So a lot of it will be the responsibility of the grantees and the consortium to actually set up the system level reviews and invite people along. There are many other activities. They are detailed. I didn't put them all in here because it's not easy to read them out to you. Please go into the guidelines. Please read them both, stage 1 and stage 2, so you understand exactly what is needed to do it. And it is a eligible activities, which means that you must do these things to be eligible for the guideline, to be eligible for the program. Ineligible activities. Now, this one we've kept, I would say, pretty relatively open, but basically business as usual stuff. So in essence, if it's not related to the program development, then it would be considered business as usual. And this is where you'll be, and this is the stuff that you cannot collate. So this would be basic, rent, accountancy fees, business insurance, that sort of stuff. But that will be in discussion with the delegate of the program once we go in. If there's any questions around these, please ask. So requirements. Now, because we're trying to be very clear with exactly what the mission should do, we've set up a requirements documents from here. These are the first level, higher level documents that we've set up. But the key aspect around this and the intention around this is that we're trying to articulate the key high level service requirements. So there's sort of 2 approaches you could take when setting up requirements. The first approach is sort of tell you what we exactly want. So we want a rover, this many wheels, that sort of stuff. Or we tell you what service we want you to provide. And the intention was to tell you the service that we're asking for. So if you've probably noticed, I know that we've said the rover shall in a lot of the requirement basis, but in essence, it's all about how much regolith, how much we need to transfer, in what time frames, It's all around the automation levels we're expecting. We haven't specified, or we've aimed to not specify anything around the actual look or design of the system itself. That's in essence your job to do. So we've really tried to keep this at higher level mission and service level requirements. So we provided 2 requirement sets: the mission requirements, which are based around regolith provision and also foundation services. We have a few other ones, also quality assurance and stuff like this. And then we also have the interface control documents, which is the lander interface and the ISRU interface. And these will be developed over the stage 1 time to ensure that they're 100% clear by the end of stage 1 or by SRR. Following the requirements, so we have not provided certain requirements to you, and that's intentional. So environmental requirements, we're not responsible for the environment. That is your job to articulate what the environmental requirements are. Lunar properties, so how, like say, wheels interact with the lunar surface, how the digging elements interact with the lunar surface. These are requirements that you are to set. We're not setting those requirements. We're going to lead you to the regulation side, but you basically must be in sort of regulatory, the regulatory framework, but then it's your requirements that you've got to pull out. We'll review them during the milestones, but this is your job to ensure that they're there. And that's including things like planetary protection as well, for these requirement sets. So we're trying to pass the responsibility to you and just really articulate that service. That's fundamentally where we're trying to head. Note the requirements will change and or be updated when milestones are done. And this is very typical. There normally are updates of the requirements as a milestone is done, because we're learning more and more about the systems and how they interact with each other. So for example, if we come along and the requirement is clearly just physically very difficult to achieve, and it's going to cause major problems, we can reduce the requirements to make them a bit simpler. But there will be a negotiation with NASA, and there has to be a big negotiation point on there. And that's where the milestones come in to really help and facilitate this part. So the NASA standards consideration. So the biggest part here is why we've sort of earmarked what sort of standards that we're looking at. The biggest part is that we just want to give a framework and support and guide to when we're referencing standards. So what this means is, since we're working with NASA, we wanted to earmark NASA sets of standards that we would consider, but the biggest part is this is not a requirement onto you. You don't have to follow these standards. They are just a common frame of reference. So when we're talking to someone, when we're talking to the winners around this, and we go into the standards and say, hey, in the standard it says you need to deliver these 5 documents and you're only delivering 1, why are the other 4 missing? And then if you justify it, that's acceptable. So this process, this step forward is your case. And at the moment, with the work that we said with standards, we've just given you basically a range of reference so you don't have to go off and search for them, but please do. If you see other standards that I think are a little bit better suited for you, as long as it's clearly justified why, that is your call. So as we said, how you develop the program, how you develop your mission, that is your call on this side. But to give you guys a little bit of a frame of reference where we're looking, standards NPR 7120.8 tailored to the milestones in 0.5 is what we're looking at. So that means when it comes to 0.8, that has a lot less strict rules placed upon it in terms of managing risk. But at the same time, we want to still set up the basic milestones that we've come with the different phases. So pre-phase A, phase A, B, and with the milestones that come onto this side as well. And that also links to what deliverables you're expecting, what's the acceptance criteria to entering these milestones. If you're giving a frame of reference again to what sort of class mission, class D, category C is what we're looking at here. But as I said, this is meant to give you a little bit of guidance on what sort of level of quality and what sort of program management standards and what sort of system engineering standards that we'd be looking at, but it's your call on how you want to do this program. So how that means, the very last part of it is that typically in the NASA standards, you go up, you take your program to the certain individuals at NASA and they sign them off. That obviously will not happen. So don't put that in. Propose that we're going to go to the Chief Technology Office or something like this to sign it off. That's not the case. Here, all of the sign-offs will happen through the department, through our department, and that's how it will be pushed through. So please, when you go through the standards, obviously ignore these parts. What things that you should be looking at when it comes to it is that a lot of these standards put things like what's the margins, expectable margins that you'd have during the program. What are, what sort of roles and responsibilities would be expected for specific individuals. So a lot of programs don't have quality assurance managers, but if you look at the standards, most of the standards say that quality assurance managers, including their roles, are actually articulated there. And this sort of saves us mentioning all of these entities. But any feedback on that or any questions, please bring them forward and I'm happy to answer. So, but the key part is it's your program and it's you to articulate what you want and how you want this development to work. So another thing that we've brought up, this is probably a bit different from the other grants that we've done, and this is probably becoming more and more into our grants here as well. And you can see that we've put it in the demonstrator program too. But basically, Australian industry content was a really big conversation about how we're going to articulate this. So we haven't put hard limits on anyone, but the agency expects that a large majority of funding, and for example, 80% excluding launch costs, is to be spent in Australia. So we want to give you guys a bit of a frame of reference of where we're thinking here, what Australian industry content looks like. And around the marker of 80% is what we're looking at here. Look, I would love this to be 100%. That would be fantastic, but we do have to work in a world of realism. And to manage risks, I know individuals are going to need to go overseas. And if you justify why this should go overseas to solve this, that's completely fine. What we just don't want is people to come through and start with 20% Australian industry content, and then during the phasing of the project, it moves down to 10%. That's not ideal. That's not a good situation. What would be fine if we start with something like 85%, and then we move to 75%. That would be okay. If it's a bit below, it's a bit of your call, and we'll assess the risk as it comes forward. But we're just trying to earmark to you where we want to see this land approximately. The majority of skills and capabilities are to stay in Australia. So it's not just about project expenditure. It's also about skills and capabilities, because this is a reliable service that we want to provide, that we want to have that capability of providing in the future if we can. And so we're going to need system engineers in Australia. We're going to need program managers. We're going to need critical technology and subsystem knowledge in the country, assembly, integration, and testing. We really want a lot of these key elements in the country. Where I think it'd be interesting, where if it was my call on this, where it would be to debate what would stay in Australia and what would not. Components are always an easy one to sort of try and find from overseas. If there's Australian ones, you can develop here, but at the same time, we understand that people need to buy things from overseas to get the job done. But what we really want to see, we want to see this thing built, designed in Australia. That's a key entity here. Now, can international organizations be a part of this? Yes, they can. There are some rules around national security aspects, but they can be a part of this. But what we would not want is that all of the program sort of moves overseas. That's not the situation we want here. Either if the international organizations are here to support, or if they're aiming to come to Australia and set up and provide these sort of skills and also expenditure into Australia, with partnerships, this would be something that would need to be articulated, and we'll assess you according to that. So international organizations can be a part of it, but please remember the two areas that we're trying to look at is expenditure and skill sets to stay in the country. So ecosystem development. Ecosystem development, this is a big one as well. For us, we realize the ecosystem has to be strong to deliver these capabilities. So we're expecting the winners of the consortium is to actually provide ecosystem development activities. And we've put in some examples here, but we're actually interested to see what you guys propose to come back. And I know a lot of the players in Australia, they really are trying to help the whole ecosystem out, but it's a fundamental aspect that we need. We would like individuals to propose how they're going to develop the ecosystem, how they're going to help the Australian space ecosystem to grow over the next 10 years. So one of the things that we wanted to bring up too, and was talking about these changes that can occur. And stage one, and this is one of the key reasons why we're broken to stage one and stage two, is that there will be some adaptability that is required for stage one, and that's something that you need to take into account. And where this comes into is that we're trying to give you an indication of what could change and when, though it's no hard and fast rule. It's just to give you sort of an idea about where the risks are. So the key tasks, so providing lunar regolith and back again, we don't expect this to change significantly throughout the program, but we'll definitely know this by SRR. Eligible activities, roles and responsibilities. Yes, there is a chance that these things might change, but they're relatively broadish anyway. So, they're relatively adaptable, but we should know that by PDR ourselves. The requirements, look, there is a high chance, and I'd say any space mission I've seen in my life, any space mission requirements do change. They're done through a formal process. But they do change, and that's the reason why we've put TBC on a lot of the requirements to date, is so we can change them. There might be additional requirements get added. There might be requirements added by you. So you might say, no, these are requirements that are really needed for our side to maintain this risk. We need to put those on top. That's also completely fine. And there are requirements that might be from NASA that need to change to provide that service as well. It's normally a big negotiation, a big discussion about what these requirements will be, and that's the point of getting to SRR, is to really set those requirements by SRR. But it will be based for me on the lander PDR and also the ISRU facility PDR as well when that's done. And also, I think the constant thing about space missions, timelines change. Launches, they need to launch things. It's around, when you launch stuff, it will be around the physics of the moon at the time. That cannot be changed. So, if dates are missed, then, it might get pushed back by 6 months. That might occur. But it's expected to be between the 2026 and 2027 window timeframe here. So how is the assessment done? So key assessment criteria, the extent that your technical, so we're going to assess you on 4 criteria basically. Basically, we wanted to see what your technical solution is. And so I'll just read it out. The extent that your technical solution meets the mission constraints and how you will ensure quality of your solution. So basically, what are you going to do? That's the big part. What's your capacity and capability and resources to deliver your proposed mission, and how do you and how this meets the mission constraints? So it's not just about what you do, but can you actually deliver it? Do you have the facilities in place? Do you have the personnel in place, or will you get them during this time frame? Do you have, the finance in place? Do you have all of this? Do you have the mechanisms to run this in place? It's a really key part. How your involvement in the mission enhances your commercial viability and advances Australian Foundation services. So the big part that I have touched on, but probably not significantly, is that we are a commercial focused agency, and we want to see the commercial viability of entities like this. So we are providing $50 million and a launch to the moon. It's your job to figure out how do you frame this in a commercial mindset? How can you develop this capability for the future? Where are you actually going to get them? Where are you going to get the money from, and what's the business model that you're going to set up to maintain this capability? So, what this is really your bag, and we need to understand exactly what you are proposing here to develop this in the future, but in the commercial mindset. So this is a really important part, and we'll get further down that road, but basically, what's your side hustle? And the last one is impact of the grant funding on the Australian space sector. So what's the benefit to us, the Australian space sector? What's the benefit to the ecosystem? How much money is it going to be staying in Australia? How much the skills are staying in Australia? All of these sort of questions come out there. Now, how will the assessment be done? So this one will be slightly different. So normally we go off, and I'll go through a little bit of the assessment committee typically, but we do form a sort of an independent assessment committee, and they will go through your applications, and then in this case, so when your applications come in, this assessment committee will actually review the application and will provide a shortlist. We'll invite the shortlist to discuss their application with us. So this is going to be hoping to be relatively quick, where you'd expect we would go through your applications and we would have questions for you, and we would like to understand maybe some of the areas that we don't either understand that's in your application, or vice versa. When the assessment committee has questions that consider considerable risk, that we can ask you directly how you manage that, because it's about how are you going to deal with this mission and the ability to adapt as the situation goes forward. And then we would recommend the assessment committee would recommend suitable applicants, and then the decision maker would make the decision. And in this case, the minister is the decision maker, which grants to approve, taking into account the application assessment, findings of the committee, advice from the head or deputy of the agency, and availability of the funding. So, but in essence, it will be based on what your assessment. And as we said before, we can only assess you to the assessment criteria. So it's how you go on the assessment criteria. So next steps for you. Read both stage 1 and stage 2 guidelines and the FAQs. I can't emphasize this enough. I've read through a range of applications on different grant proposals before. It is very clear when people have not read the guidelines. It's obvious. So I would say read through the guidelines 3, 4, 5 times and really try and understand all the words that are out from there. And if there's anything is uncertain, it's okay to ask questions, come back, and then we will generally, if we have an answer to it, we'll put it up on the FAQs. So constantly look at the FAQs for any updated answers that might come through there too. Second thing is partner up, find partnerships. That's really an important part. You really need to come as a consortium. I mean, we haven't put down that you must have partners. It's sort of unless you're a PFRO, but to develop this capability, it's a significant level of capability. A consortium is going to be a really integral part to make this occur. So find yourself the partners who have the capability to deliver it. Apply for the program. Really do sit down, apply for this program, and we'll see you on the moon. Now, before I go into questions and answers, we do have some more resources. And before we go into that, just so you know, we broke this down into 2 parts primarily. So if people did want to leave, they can. And I was going to go through the proposal template next, or the project proposal, if anyone wanted some extra information on what's going here. Well, not extra, or just some updates, a clarification on the information we've provided already. But today, go to the AusIndustry website, business.gov.au, go to the Trailblazer program, look at this. Also, please look at the agency website for some of the information on this. You'll notice the roadmaps are being updated, and the robotics and automation roadmap should be coming out soonish. So, and then also look at the Moon to Mars initiative that's there. And if you have any questions, please ring the call center or email AusIndustry. So don't email the agency. We have to then send it straight back to AusIndustry. If there's any questions around the program, go straight to AusIndustry. We talk to them directly about these inquiries if they don't have the answers. Okay, I guess let's get to the Q&A.
To slido.com, and we've got 2 event codes coming up. We've got hashtag Trailblazer for any questions and hashtag TB-bid for sharing your contact details. So we started. Remember, you can upvote questions as well if there are any particular ones you want to make sure we do get to answer today. So first off, we have, is there a minimum amount for mass/volume of regolith collected to satisfy the primary objective?
So we have stated in the requirements a level of regolith, which was approximately 2 kilos. Well, not approximately, it is 2 kilos what we've put down in the requirements. This is not a condition of any of the agreements. So this, for right now, we want people to be able to bid and have a consistent bid. So it would be sort of unfair if someone said, I'm going to provide 100 grams, and someone else came along and said, well, I'm going to provide 10 kilos. Because the risks associated to 10 kilos would be significantly different to that of 100 grams. So we've set a specific value of 2 kilos, which would be, I think, at the upper level of what is possible, but still feasible. That would, which we've set. But if this is a considerable risk or an uncertainty, then it needs to be clearly stated by you to say, look, no, this would be very close to possible, but this would make it easier, and this is the level we would expect to be able to do. So, as we said, we can challenge requirements, but when you put the bid in for the requirements that we've set. But if you propose to change them, that's completely acceptable as well.
Our next question is, how will budget and grants be handled in case of mission delays? Will grantees be provided sustenance funds for any period of delays?
Campbell, I'll take that one. It's Pete Hunter from the program area. So we would work very closely, obviously, with the successful grant recipient to ensure that if there are any delays, we would still ensure that the grant funding would be provided in the correct manner. Generally, what we do is end up having an initial set of funding to the grantee on execution of the grant agreement. We then obviously have like another payment halfway through the project itself, and then we'd obviously have like a remaining at the end of the project too. If there are delays with the mission, delays with COVID, whatever it might be, we'd always ensure that we work very closely with the grant recipient to ensure that everything can still stay on track. And if things do get pushed out, we'll come to that when it does arise. Granting programs always come around these particular problems, but we always work with the grant recipient.
The only thing I'll add to that as well, Pete, is if you noticed in the grant guidelines, we've allowed you to have 20% contingency this time around. And it is broken, as we said, we've broken it down into two, stage 1 and stage 2, so you can compartmentalize the risk on this side. So going into stage 2, you will know significant level of the risks that are associated, and you could identify the contingency that would be needed for this. But the contingency at the moment is on your side to manage from this side. So primarily the extra funding that if you're asking if there's extra funding, right, as the grant has spoken today, the 50 million is it. But noting on top of that, so previously we, if we didn't do the agreement with NASA, then you would also have to take the risk of the launcher. So as well, this time now that's compartmentalized under NASA. So any sort of cost overruns that's coming from the launcher that would typically have to have been funded if we were a previous program without the NASA agreement, you would have had to deal with that as well. So we are compartmentalizing the risk to the rover, but the contingency is on your side.
Right.
And then also
the next question
funding as well.
Our next question is, will the lunar regolith be accessible for Australian research facilities as well?
So I'm assuming, I just want to understand, so the primary task is to transfer lunar regolith from the lunar surface to the ISAU facility. Now, if someone wants to do science on that lunar regolith, that's a secondary objective, and that's completely acceptable, but it must not dominate or jeopardize the primary objective. So if you wanted to do that, that can be a part of the proposal. That's completely your call. And if you wanted to bring that information back and then provide it to the research facilities, that's also fine as well. But we haven't mandated that you must do it. There is, though, if you probably noticed in some of the conditions for the stage 2, is that there is the intention for us to jointly publish with NASA the research that has come from this, because it is the research has come from this, and there still is negotiations of exactly what that would be, but it is it's clear that it would be something along the lines of, how does the rover actually work in the lunar environment? What is the friction values between all the wheels and the digging implements? Items like this that we would communicate in the public forum. So please, it's in stage 2 that states this, but from the summary of your question, there is nothing that mandates that you must provide this as a science, but if you want to do this, if you want to collect scientific information and provide it, and if you want to put it in your proposal, that's up to you. Also encouraged. It's something that would actually help the ecosystem out as well.
Are you looking for a completely autonomous rover or a teleop/hybrid kind of rover?
So in the requirements, please read the requirements in detail twice, 3, 4 times. In the requirements, it states quite articulately what level of autonomy we are looking for. Of course, with every requirement, there is some ambiguity. It's not meant to, but I know that they do occur, but it does state clearly what sort of level of autonomy we are wanting to have. And that was, we spent a long time trying to discuss exactly how we would articulate this correctly, because we need to be quite clear. So we've spent a lot of effort trying to articulate this. So please read through the requirements, but there is a level of autonomy that is defined as a sort of pass, and there is, you can always do more than that, but there is a certain minimum level of autonomy that we're expecting. So please read in the mission requirements for the foundation services capabilities that we want to achieve. But in essence, it's sort of semi-autonomous, but there's a range of tasks that we're expecting for that autonomy side.
Great. Will the agency support fundraising activities with state governments as one way for a consortium to provide 1 million plus 10 million co-contributions or other funding sources?
So in that particular vein, we do have within the guidelines itself that the successful grantee is responsible for the remaining project expenditure. So 2 successful recipients will receive up to $4 million. So there needs to be a co-contribution of cash of $1 million. We will accept, some other funding from state, territory, or local governments, but if it's Commonwealth funding, that cannot be used for this particular project.
And will the agency support? I mean, of course, we always need to make sure that we work in a fair and equitable manner to both consortium recipients. So I'm just talking about just after the winners are announced, and there's two individuals. We will be working, we'll be introducing and facilitating, the winners and introducing to the state representatives. But from what I know of the industry of today, anyway, most of the consortiums actually know their state representatives. But we will obviously provide that facilitation, but we're not going to sit there and demand the states to provide funding to you. That's not going to be our role. But we will facilitate an introductions to the individuals that you requested. But we will provide that to both parties.
Our next question is the co-investment to come from industry, or can it come from local and state government, which I think we've covered. Fantastic. Our next one, how involved can high school/university students be with Trailblazer? It's a fantastic opportunity to inspire the nation with direct involvement.
So first thing I'd say, it's always fantastic to get school kids and to get universities involved. Always encourage this, and this is sort of where we've been trying to push to in some of the areas for the ecosystem development, and it's a real key part. But as the guidelines state, the key entity for an eligibility is based on, are you incorporated, and if you are a PFRO, a publicly funded research organisation, that's to apply. Of course, if the consortium wants to put this as a major, wants to develop this and use this, then it's considered an ecosystem development activity, and you can advertise this, you can put this forward. So it's up to you, the consortium, but we're not going to mandate that you must do it.
Our next question is, do you expect space qualification of componentry? And if so, when do you expect that to be done by?
So mitigating risk, and this is why the stage one, basically the verification plan of your mission is your call. We have certain milestones that we must pass, and if you look at the guidelines, you must pass the safety review, and there will be with NASA. So basically, are you going to destroy something when you're up on the lunar surface? Can you operate safely? There is a certain level of autonomy, but the verification approach and how you get there is your call. And what you want to do. If you feel that qualification of componentry is going to reduce the risk and you have the time and money for it, then put it forward. If you feel that's not the case, then it's yours. But it's completely, your verification validation methodology is up to you. As long as you achieve the ultimate service, that's what we're only worried about.
Our next question is, what consideration is put towards risk to justify overseas sourcing of materials and parts? Are there agreed risk principles for industry to refer to?
So in the guidelines, I've sort of linked up some of the risks. Actually, no, it wasn't in the guidelines. We did it in the guidance. So out there's industry standards for the risks and how you can identify and manage risk. Having a risk plan is essential for any spacecraft mission. So, what risk level, it's your call on what risk that's come down. So I think the part here that everyone's thinking is that we're the customer, and that's not the case. This is a grant. So the customer is the customer that you choose, and in essence, we're fulfilling a service with NASA. So primarily here, it's not about how we're stating that you need to have this certain level of risk. It's the risk that you, the consortium, consider necessary to achieve that service. So we want to see the workings of your risk mitigation plans. We want to see a proposal that is going to mitigate risk, and you have to pass certain criteria such as safety reviews and qualification reviews that have been set up by you. But we're not going to sit here and manage your risk for you. That is in essence the responsibility of you to manage. We just want to see you put forward a reasonable risk management approach, identification of risk and the mitigations of that risk. So how you want to do that is your call, but we're not going to sit here. So if someone, for example, you're asking someone to paint the house, you're not going to tell them exactly what paints they're going to have to purchase, and the color, yes, but the quality and this sort of stuff, it's their call. You just look at the end result, and that's the same here. We're looking at the end result. We want that service to be provided. How you get there, what risks you are willing to accept to get this, and we will assess you. And during the assessment procedures, we'll assess you which is the lower risk strategy. And you've probably noticed as well, we're really trying, one of the key risks we did identify was scope creep. So, if you come with a proposal that you want to do one task, the primary task, and then 15 other tasks on top, we see that as a major risk. So we have tried to limit risk from our side to sort of really articulate that scope. And a lot of your job is to mitigate that and to make that risk the lowest you can within the funding and time profile that you have. And then we'll assess you according to the assessment criteria, but we want to see strategies that are going to mitigate this risk. So your call.
Will applicants be encouraged to work with other applicants if they have a better solution to a particular problem?
So partnerships, this is probably a big question there. So something I didn't say in the presentation, but there is a lead applicant, and then there are partners, and then there's subcos. The lead applicant, the lead applicant cannot be a part of two consortiums. That's their job, to be a part of the one. But partners can. So we had said you can't have exclusivity arrangements. You can't force one partner to just be with you. You have to allow them to go into multiple consortiums. In essence, we won't. From as the guidelines are written, we're not forcing individuals to partner specifically with certain groups. We've aimed to keep the lead applicant and the consortium managers to actually have control of their program. But of course, we may come and have a chat with you about certain options that might be available at significantly lower cost that we do have available in government in the future. And of course, if you see from a consortium side, if you see things that are available that could improve your proposal, we can discuss this during stage 1 and stage 2 to really get the best. So we really want this mission to work, and we want to see consortiums put the best solution forward, but we're not going to demand certain partners to work with each other.
Great. Popular question that's been upvoted quite a lot. Is the intention of the industry growth component to partner with groups like One Giant Leap and Moonshot, like an AIC mechanism, or to develop new programs?
Don't completely understand. So you mean for the industry growth? So industry growth, I'll say from our industry growth side, we didn't want this to be a one-off mission. That's primarily the case. We wanted to build a capability in Australia that is, that has some commercial viability in space or outside space. And we've done a lot of work to ensure that this mission, is in an area that we see a high potential, which is foundation services. How the commercial viability of that and how you're going to make a commercial entity of this is sort of up to the consortium. So if you see, if some people see that it's going to be selling services to other sectors, that might be an option from you guys. Some people might say, what, exploration is going to be a big money maker in the future. I see this is our real area to go. Or some might just sell the technology in a way that they that can do it. The IP is yours, and how you do that is your call. We wouldn't expect you to, as I said, we'll only assess you on the assessment criteria. So what partnerships and what proposals you put forward is clearly your call on this. But we do assess you on your basically on how you're going to make this commercially viable for the future. I don't know if I fully answered that, but I'm not going to tell you that, you must partner with this group. That's that we won't say that. So it's who you partner with, who your consortium is. That's your discussion, and how you're going to make revenue from this, or build capability that could potentially build revenue in the future. That's also your proposal.
Next question is, what is the qualification review?
So it's a typical review that would happen. You'd normally qualify the product, and then you'd accept the product later. I think, yeah. So basically, it's a typical review that would happen after, that would happen at the end. So it'd be your full system qualification test, and you'd sit down and look through all of your products and all the qualification tests that you've done, and actually qualify the product and say, okay, this product is now qualified, and then you normally accept it, which is you do an acceptance review, and that means there's just different tests and different test levels that would normally occur for acceptance and qualification. But in essence, it's if the big question you're asking at the end of all this, before you fly, is this product going to work? And that in the qualification review and acceptance reviews, that you've got to be able to answer that question, and with proof, and that normally is tests.
Right. Our next question. Will acceptable risk profile requirements be provided, or will that be a part of the grantee decision/evaluation criteria?
So this is always a tough one. We had a big debate on how to manage risk and sort of give an earmark. So one of the ways we've proposed today is that in the requirements we've set a certain level of risk and a percentage, which is not ideal, but it is a method. So in essence, we're saying what sort of risk that we would like to see from the rover, and that's basically a percentage of failure. Now, what I 100% know that to parameterize exactly that is very difficult. So a lot of the time, if you put a risk strategy forward that will articulate, something in a reasonable fashion, then once we've kicked off the program, then that's the risk strategy that's moved forward, and we most likely will then change that requirement to as a partial compliance with respect to the risk strategy, that the risk plan that's been put forward. So we've tried to earmark what sort of level of risk that we're expecting, but we can't really come here and say, what, this is exactly all the techniques you need to do to mitigate risk. That's your call on what that is, and we will in essence accept that proposal. So once again, it's your call on how much risk you can mitigate. But there's going to be risk. It's a lunar mission. I mean, there's always risk. So you've got a certain time frame, you've got a certain money. Your job is in essence to reduce that risk to the minimum amount with the time and cost that we have.
Right. Our next question. If we choose to use a nuclear power pack and test our rover in Australia, will the Australian Space Agency organise a variation to the federal government non-nuclear policies?
I actually don't have any comments on this one. I'm sorry. So I'm not exactly aware of all of the procedures related to the nuclear side of things. Though, it's not atypical for individuals to use an RTU, especially for missions that are beyond the moon. But that's a risk I think you would need to assess. There is a potential that it may say, no, we cannot do certain things like this. That's come from the regulation of today. That might change your design significantly. So for me, are we going to change all this regulation? I can't say, because I'm just, for me, it's about this program and about just getting the program done, and how the agencies will step forward in some of this regulation. I think that will be discussion out of this forum. But from an individual who is proposing, let's say, an RTU into the rover, you'd have to assess the risks associated with the regulation coming down and saying you can't use it. So, but I'm not aware of the regulation on this, so I can't really directly comment on it. But I would treat the regulation of today as a framework that you need to work under, if your mission is dependent on the success of change of regulation to achieve it, that's a risk that you probably want to identify and figure out how to mitigate.
Requirements are flagged as changeable. If significant, would there be consideration of reviewing budget?
So right now the budget we have available is the 50 million, and also the co-funding that we've got. We parameterize this down into stage 1 and stage 2 primarily for this reason, is that to get someone to come along and say we can change anything we want at any time, and then we get to the moon is not palatable for most situations. So we've put this into 2 stages. So you compartmentalize your risk into this stage, and you might come along onto stage 2 and say, actually, this risk is just too much for us as a company to step into stage 2. So I'd say that once the changes to the service level requirements, if there are any significant changes that are going to occur beyond the end of stage 1, that is for a mission, that is typically a huge problem anyway. Most of your requirements should be set, and I'm talking about the service level, high level requirements. They should be set by the system requirements review. Otherwise, you can't really pass the system requirements review. So, and definitely by PDR, you should have the solution out for those system requirements. Now, if you're changing them, you can't really pass those 2 milestones. So in essence, for me, it is expected that the requirements will be relatively set after SRR and no later than PDR. So we wouldn't, and that's the service level requirements we're talking about. Of course, if you're level 2, so subsystem level requirements, if you're changing them, that's your call, and how you manage that's also your call. But this would be in any major changes that would be happening after stage 2, the service level requirements would be in significant negotiation and discussion with NASA and with the consortium. So it would be all eyes open approach for here. We would not just change things without a major consultation with the industry with the participants first. So in summary, I can say I don't expect changes to happen after
All
stage
right, we
2.
have time for one more question.
Sorry.
Do we know where/what region on the moon the CLIPS lander will land the rover?
No. So we know polar. That is the earmarked location of today. Where that's going to be a study done by NASA, and they'll put forward the exact location, and that will be something if we have requirements that we need to add to that. So conditions, and that will be normally like surface conditions and things like that, which most likely will be something similar to what NASA wants as well. Then we would need to filter those requirements into that and support NASA with this. We don't, I don't expect we have any choice over the landing thing. It will be based heavily on the payloads that they bring to the table, and less on what we do. But of course, if we have conditions that we need of the landing site, then we would, in stage 1, we would bring this forward as inside the interface documents of conditions of the landing site that we would want. Would we receive them? That's a negotiation we'd have to do with NASA and ourselves and yourself and the recipients. So it's still open, and actually landing sites can, as probably in all lunar missions, landing sites can change even in middle of the mission as well. So something that we need to adapt, but polar is what is expected today.
Great. Thank you very much, Campbell, for answering those questions. We will have a second Q&A at the end of the next session, which I will hand over back to Campbell to chat with us a little bit about the proposal. So over to you.
Fantastic. Cool. It's been fantastic to be able to ask all these questions, because it's really good to see what the industry are thinking and where the aspects come into it. And I'll go back into the project proposal very quickly. But the biggest part we want to earmark for the mission itself is that in typical space missions, not everything is set at the beginning. It's near impossible. They've got to figure out what our rover looks like before they can set the interface completely. And so hence it's done in this milestone approach. But as we said, all changes will be in discussion with NASA and us and the industry partners. So you'll know of them coming, and you'll be able to counter them if the changes are not not going to be reasonable for us. So you'll be in the tent to be able to discuss this. Okay, so let's get to the project proposal. Now, you've noticed that we've put this project proposal in this time, and the demonstrator guidelines also have this entity around that you need to attach a project proposal. And I'll go into the reason why, but it is an extra step we've put on top. And the reason is primarily, one second. The primary reason for this is because we really need, we don't actually have time for this mission for not all the information to be presented. You know, we've got a pretty short time frame. We have an MCR that will be after the winner's announced, probably a couple of months straight after. You're going to need to present your work to the MCR, and that's during recruitments, that's during, you know, getting the teams together, getting the partnerships down. So we have to move very quickly here so we can pass the MCR and the SRR. And to help support that, we're trying to really upfront articulate what information you're going to need to bring to, you know, you're going to need to tell us. And so this is, you know, ensure there's enough suitable information available for the assessments to be done. It supports you in the proposal generation. So we get a lot of questions that come through regularly, like, oh, how many words for that, and what information should we put in? Look, we're just sort of telling you up front now. This is sort of what we would consider would be reasonable. It's also to save you time. I know it looks like a lot more work, but in essence, it's not wasted work. That's sort of the way I see it. A lot of people, when we put a proposal down, you know, they might have huge swabs of information that is actually just irrelevant to the assessment. And so that for me is completely is not useful. When it comes to this, we're really trying to articulate what is some of the useful information to help make these assessments. Ensure a level of reasonable work, as it says, because the MCR is quite quickly, and you know, after the winners are announced, and follow typical industry standards as well. So don't be afraid. And I expect this this proposal template, I expect this to be iterated over time, you know, for future programs. But don't be afraid if someone asks for a mission, you know, you need to bid for a mission, let's say with another organization. Don't be afraid to take this proposal template and use this as a baseline for how you want to propose that mission to them. Because this is actually around typical industry standards. It's not something. We've used it off what the industry typically would do. So don't be afraid to use this for other missions that you might be doing. Now, I will state this though: we assess applicants only against the assessment criteria. So we might have asked for information here that you think is not relevant to the assessment criteria, and you may say, look, I don't want to put that in. That's your call. We only assess you according to the assessment criteria. That's it. So I can't now add, you know, extra assessment criteria in this. That's not what's happening. We're just asking you what packets of information would be very helpful and which position. So, and once again, this is a mandatory thing. You must provide it. Now, in essence, it's just a proposal, project proposal document. So what the details are, that's how detailed it is, that's your call. So we've broken the proposal template down into 5 parts: strategic proposal, technical proposal, implementation proposal, management proposal, and financial proposal. It's not unheard of for procurements. They also have contract proposals as well. And you probably noticed there is a strategic proposal. Whoever's done other bids before, strategic proposals are sort of a new one. That's not typical. And that's primarily because when you do a procurement, the strategy and the business case is actually set up by the procurer. But since this is a grant, we need you to articulate what your benefit is to you. So hence the strategic proposal is on your side. Please note, this is a template. It is not mandatory. You do not have to follow this template if you don't want to. If you feel like there's another way of doing this, then that's your call. But I will say this, it is highly recommended. So, and the reason is because, you know, if you have that packets of information in the same positions on every proposal, then it really makes it much simpler for assessing, much simpler. So what I'd say here, if there's some key information that you think that needs to be in here that is not articulated in the template, put it in the position that you want. And if you think the argument is really convoluted because of the way that the template has been set up, sure, rearrange it to what you think is needed, because it's your argument. But if it's just semantics, for example, you're saying, oh, look, I'd prefer to put that information up here just because I like it up here, and we've done that every other time. Please don't. Put it where it is now, and then it will make life a bit simpler for everyone. You can change the template, but please let us know. So what to help everyone out, if you're going to change everything dramatically, or you say, look, I've moved this here, I've moved that there, and I've moved this here, put it up front. Say, look, we had the template, but we've changed it because of this, and so these sections have been moved to this area. That's completely fine as well. Don't use agency branding or logo. So this is your proposal, not our proposal. Don't put the agency symbols on it. Don't put, this is a proposal from you guys. Put all of your branding on this side. And the one thing I haven't probably stated is that all of this, the proposal template guidance and all of the proposal template are in attachments in the business.gov.au website on Trailblazer. So if you're trying to find them, look there. I've tried to articulate exactly what we would like at what point, but it's just a guideline for you guys. So tips and tricks. This is the fun one. And you've probably noticed I put this in bold. Read the guidelines. I've said it before and I'll say it again. It is very obvious when people have not read the guidelines. It's 100% clear. They make very silly mistakes that exclude them. And there are some really key eligible items that you need to be, to be eligible to apply. You need to say that you are eligible, that you are compliant to that. If you're not, then we actually have to, we can't look at your bid. So don't be the groups that forget to add some CEO, item because it wasn't there, or don't be the individuals that forgot to state that they were compliant to this eligible activity, because unfortunately we actually have to take your bid off, and it's clearly stipulated in the guidelines. So read through the guidelines, pull out the things that you must do, and then get someone else to read them again and pull them out again to ensure that that's 100% there, and then have a checklist once you're going to put your proposal in, and make sure that is there. I can't stress that enough. So read the FAQs, they will be updated. And that's because typically, we need a mechanism when someone asks a question, how do we answer it? So this webinar will be put on the website, and then we'll also have the presentation as well. But so you'll have all this information available publicly for everyone. But of course, some people will send us emails about some of the questions, and then we can put, if there's a lot of them, we'll put an FAQ up on it. So we won't privately email people back and say, oh, this is how you do this. It has to be public. So we'll put it on an FAQ so everyone's aware. So, every couple of days, every week or so, open the FAQs again to see if there's an addition. It's very useful. So make it easy for assessors. This is a really, really key. If you make it hard work for assessors, it makes life very difficult for everyone. And they're working hard to really make your proposal stand up. Then comparative, someone who's made it super simple, then do it. And you'll notice in the proposal template, at the very top of each of those parts, we put a compliancy for, a compliancy table. And what that is that, if you see something that's critical that you need to do to be successful to win, put that in the compliancy table to say, okay, a good example is, it's a $4 million bid with $1 million co-contribution. Put that at the top, $1 million co-contribution. Yes, we have provided, here's our evidence. It must be in $4 million. Yes, look at our project expenditure. We're spending $4 million worth of grant. Make it clear, like really clear. And if you don't be afraid when you you can link them off. So to, the details are somewhere in below, but you need a big summary to ensure at the top of it that you have really passed all the criteria that's necessary. You want those key messages to be at the very top of each of your parts, so it's 100% clear of what's going on. Justify your proposal with evidence. There's a lot of people who claim things that are really not backed up. We're the greatest is a really common one. We're the greatest out there. We're the best at doing this in the world. And at the same time, the assessors know who's out there. And, so it's quite clear that it's not 100% true. So if you're going to claim something like that, you've got to put evidence behind it to say, yes, well, actually, we're the only ones who develop this technology in the world. And you can see from the industry forums that we are the top of that because of this and this and this. So that's completely fine, but don't claim things if you're not going to back up with evidence. Don't hide issues. So that's another really big one. Don't hide issues. Tell us how you will solve them. So you really need to come in and sit there and say, these are major risks we see. This is how we're going to solve them. Where concerns come in is if someone, because we'll have multiple proposals coming in, and someone 4 candidates have mentioned this major risk and you haven't. That's a red flag for a lot of assessors when they're coming through. So, mention the risk and say how you're going to solve it. It's very important. And actually, it gives a lot more confidence to say, yep, because remember, this is a lunar mission. Lunar missions are meant to be tough. They're not meant to be an easy thing to do. We expect problems. They need to be earmarked at the front. So don't hide them. Put them at the front. Tell them how, and give us confidence that you can solve these problems. And use the annex for details. It's don't you don't, if you want to put budgets in to say, look, this is all my inner workings. This is the work I've done. Perfect. Put them in the annexes and then refer to the summary at the top in the proposals. Right. On that note, I will say, and I haven't put it here, these proposals are relatively common in a lot of the international forums. If you're needing support, try and find individuals who've done them before. There are individuals out there. A lot of them are international. There are some in Australia. Try and find them. It will help you get this up and running because you've got 3 months to really get this happening. So, strategic proposal. What is the point of this? It's to provide info on the benefit of the project to the Australian space industry achieving its goals. So how are you going to benefit Australia and the Australian space industry achieving those broad goals? And that is jobs, that is growth. How's it going to help your organization and your organizations? Like, what is the benefit to you guys with this? Why is it useful? And what's the benefit to the Australian ecosystem? Like, how is that going to happen? So key considerations that you might want to put in here: what's your business case? What's the Australian industry content you've got, and how you're going to benefit the ecosystem. So and also how you're going to benefit. How is this going to benefit? How many jobs are you going to create? How much revenue are you expecting to have here? So and what's the second and third order effects of this as well? Like, okay, look, we'll be setting up suppliers. Those suppliers will then also be generating this. This is the prediction. You need to start showing the evidence and proving the benefit of this. So this is some of the key areas of the strategic proposal. It's all about what is the benefit of this mission. It's not about how you're going to implement it. It's about what's the benefit of the mission. The technical proposal. So this is where you would put all basically the mission itself and all the technical aspects that come with the mission. So what is the solution that you're actually going to provide, and how do you justify it with the rationale that you've got? So what is it? Are you doing a rover? Are you going to do a rover with 4 wheels? Are you going to do a rover with 10 wheels? Are you going to do tracked rovers? Are you going to do, what's your automation procedures going to look like? What's the design? How is it going to look? What are you expecting this to? What's your concept of operations? And the typical thing we see that I see quite regularly with a lot of proposals that come forward is, and I call it solutioneering, is people come in and say, this is the solution, and that's it. And that's not, and maybe it might be a great solution, but there's no justification of why it is a good solution. There's no setting up of how you got to that solution. You just say, that's the solution and that's what we're going to do. For this, we expect people, really good system engineering basis is setting up the objectives and the key constraints. Think, what are things that you cannot change? What are things you can change? And then how are you arriving to the solution? It feels way more confident if someone comes in and says, I don't have the full solution yet, but these are my open points, but this is my methodology of how I'm getting down to it, and this is approximately what the solution is going to look like. That gives assessors way more confidence that you're going to get this job done, compared to someone said, this is my design, and then give no justification behind it. So really do good system engineering. Set up your objectives, set up your key requirements, look in your constraints. You've got a whole bunch of environmental constraints that we haven't set in here that you're going to need to justify. Do an assessment. What do you believe these should look like? What are the implications of all of this? Propose, a rough technical solution, concept of operations with the justifications that are coming down on this way. We have major constraints relating to mass budget. What sort of mass are you thinking here? What are your basic mission concept of op? You'll notice that the time frames are going to be very tight because we have to do this in a short period of time. How are you going to solve all of these key technical problems? Radiation is a real key issue. How is that going to be done? What's your risk associated with this? What's your mission risk? How are you going to mitigate this mission risk? Set up your risk matrices, start going down the mitigation techniques that you'd have to use. And once again, in the annexes, all the details, like all the really hardcore data, should be in the annexes. And that will be, you'll notice I've already set up the templates for compliances. So we put requirements in here. It's not mandated that you are compliant to these requirements, though if you come back and say you're not compliant to all the requirements, it's going to be very tough to get a good mark. But if you are challenging requirements and saying, okay, that requirement's a tough one, we think we're intending to be compliant to it, but these are our difficulties, this is 100% acceptable. So we want to see good system engineering. We want to see good, technical solutions provided here. You've got to give us confidence that you know what you're doing when it comes to doing lunar missions. Once again, and I will reiterate, we set up compliancy tables for the eligible activities. You must be compliant to the eligible activities. Must. Please don't put down non-compliances. You can put down compliance with an explanation next to it. That's completely fine, but do not put down non-compliance there because we have to throw out your proposal. Implementation proposal. So explain how you'll implement the project. I think this is pretty clear. And one of the key aspects is, so at the top two, it's very much mission orientated. So what's your strategic of the mission? So achieving this mission, what's the benefit to you? With your technical proposal, it's very much about what's the technical solution that you're going to provide for the whole mission. Of course, there's a lot of detail on the first, what you're going to do on the technicals, but it's a big mission orientated. Implementation, we've broken it down to stage 1 and stage 2. And in essence, you need to provide details of what you're going to do in stage 1. Like I'm talking day by day, week by week, what are you going to do? Stage 2 is obviously way less detailed. You need to indicate what you're going to do in stage 2, but what we don't want is someone to say, I'm doing stage 1 and I'll figure out stage 2 in the back end. There are some key constraints such as the launch date. You've got to deliver the rover by a certain time. How are you going to manage this? These are all key questions that you'd need to understand. How is that going to be implemented? So, schedule, work logic, what are you going to deliver at what time? So what delivery item list would you provide at which milestones? And this is something that, in stage 2, you can be a little bit more vague on, but in stage 1, what MCR, what are you going to deliver? 100%, and I'm talking documents with document numbers, SRR2 and PDR. What exactly is there? What's your acceptance criteria to enter those milestones? How are you going to review it? How are you going to do your milestones? So, and what's your work breakdown structure and what's your work packages? These are really important details that you need to sort of stipulate to give the assessors confidence that you are capable of doing the job. Management proposal. So how are you going to management? I would say, once again, we assess you only on the assessment criteria. How are you going to manage the proposal? This is a really key entity. You really need to, we need to understand, how are you going to manage this project? Once again, very detailed in stage 1. You could be a little less detailed in stage 2. Who are your consortium members? What do they do? Why are they your consortium members? What do they bring to the table? What's their heritage that comes behind it? How are you going to manage the consortium? How are you going to manage your stakeholders? How are you going to manage risk? How are you going to manage technical entities? What happens if there's non-conformance? What are you going to do there? How are you going to manage quality, regulation? What's your digital strategy? How are you going to put this together? What's your reporting lines that comes up between your consortium? If there's a conflict with your consortium, how are you going to deal with this? These are things that gives key entities that you're capable to do the job. How you will manage change. It's a really big one. There's a lot of uncertainties in the mission in stage 1. How are you going to manage that? How your organization and activities, how you organize your activities and why? Like what are the reporting lines? Who has the ultimate authority? Typically a project manager does, but then at the same time you have a steering committee. If you've got a consortium of 5 members, which member is the one that makes the decision? These are all, what's your governance system? So how are you going to do this? And then secondly, what facilities do you have or earmarked to get? So, this is stage 1. It's a very early phase. We don't expect you to have, everything on hand, but you should be articulating what are you going to acquire, this sort of stuff. So a good example here, you're going to need test facilities for doing all your qualification tests. To do an assessment to say these test facilities exist in Australia, we would be expecting to do this, but we'll engage with them later. That's fine because it's in stage 2. But if we said, we're going to use a test facility that doesn't exist, or maybe that doesn't exist in Australia or doesn't exist in the world, it's very hard to sell that. So you need to do your homework to understand, are those facilities out there? Where around about would they exist? And if there is a critical test that you need to do and that facility is very limited, then you would be reaching out to that facility early on to say, hey, does it exist? Is it capable of doing that? So tools, personnel, personnel, we've asked for CVs. If you're claiming you've got a lot of space heritage, prove it. prove the personnel has that experience with the CVs. What missions have they worked on? What lunar missions have they worked on? What rover missions have they worked on? What the companies have worked on those missions as well. Once again, stage 1, very detailed. You should be really clear on what you're going to do over stage 1. Stage 2, we can be a little bit broader, higher level. Financial proposal. So, I mean, how the finances work is that you'll get paid along the milestones that you've proposed, but a lot of this proposal is to show that the costs that are coming out you're predicted. Can they change through the mission? Of course. I mean, costs, you don't know everything when you first do your proposal. Well, you're learning it at MCR, your MCR and your SRR and your PDR. So we always expect these costs to be revised, and we'll constantly be monitoring these costs to see that we have enough contingency at what point. But we need to know where your costs are. We need to know how, where have your risks, how have you mitigated the risks through your costing structure, how much cost do you expect this to occur? And that will help decisions being made, like, do we need to reduce the scope? Or is there too much technology risk that we're adding and we need to do this? So it's about providing the information that's needed to make those key decisions in the future. So we need to understand what your expenditures are. We need to understand what your contingency is. So if you're starting with 20%, do you expect that's going to be used or not used? At what time and what risks would you be using that for? How are you going to manage your contingency? And what costs would you expect for each milestone? And this will help significantly for stage 1 and stage 2. So the funding profile is it's not set. We can move it. So if we see too much funding is happening at the beginning, we can shift the money back. We can move things around as well. So we want to know approximately where the costs would be coming in, and ensuring that the money is available for you when you need it. So this is also to help manage the funds coming towards you. Right. So normally this goes to Q&A now, but once again, if you didn't see the last one, go to business.gov.au, go to Moon to Mars Trailblazer. All the details are in there. Please download it, read it. And then once again, for further information, please look at the Space Agency website. And if you have any questions, go to the business.gov.au. You can send an email, you can call them. Please, all questions to business.gov.au, not through our inquiries line. Go straight to business.gov.au. So I hope that has helped. I hope that has provided support, and I'm expecting a range of questions coming in, but we also have provided a document to help as well. So this is really one of the key entities. And actually, any feedback on this is fantastic, because we expect this will change over more and more missions. What information is missing? What information should we put in? What is there better arrangements for it? This doesn't need to be a part of Trailblazer, but as a broader consultation, any feedback on it is fantastic. It's the first time we've done it, and I believe this will support significantly getting these missions up and running. But it requires obviously feedback from you guys to get it perfect, let's say in the next couple of years. So okay, fantastic. Any questions?
Many questions, Campbell, for you. So we will get started. What happens if no applicant is deemed suitable for the project in terms of experience, capability to deliver, etc.?
In essence, we're going to assess to the criteria, and we're going to take the top two from us. If they're past the eligibility criteria, we're going to take the top 2 applicants in that sense. So when you say not, I don't see how we would come to that conclusion that no one's completely. We would see there's risks, of course, to the proposals that we have, but we understand the Australian space industry of what it is today. There's not a range of missions flying to the moon every day from Australia, so we do understand the level of there. But it is the consortium's job to figure out how to mitigate this risk to the best of what they can. But of course, if there are things that the industry propose through their proposals to help mitigate that risk that would support, then put them in the proposals and we'll read them. And once we kick off stage 1, and if we start with those individuals, then we'll sit down with those proposals and try and best support and mitigate it, what we can do from our side.
Is there the possibility of 2 stage 1 bids being asked to work together to deliver stage 2 if they have complementary solutions and or technologies that are identified?
That would seem ideal, but it's not. I don't, from our guidelines and how they're written, we're not going to sit there and say join together. Now, if the two consortiums decide to do something like this, that's sort of their call. But once again, only one lead consortium can come through. So it's not. There's nothing going to come mandated from us. In light of that, of course, one of the consortiums will fall short. Now, if if some of the partners want to then go over and even go over to stage one, then it's up to go over to the other consortium, and it's up to the consortium lead on what they want to do there. So we're not going to mandate certain things on the consortium lead. It's their program to run. We're not going to tell them that they need to work with these individual groups. Specifically, we're just not going to do it. And how the guidelines are written, it's up to the consortium lead on who they want to bring in as a partnership from their side. So, but of course, once one of the missions fall away, one of the groups fall away, there's going to be some technology that's developed there. I mean, it'd be great to see that technology move into the next one. But generally, how missions work, they're normally, the technology is built into another area. It's another group. What we'd like to see, it's an intention, but is that why we set up two is that we are obviously, the aim is not to be one mission. So to have sort of some redundancy in your supply chains, you'd want the capability from two consortiums in Australia. If this service is going to be needed in the future. So I can't say that there's going to be future missions as of to date, but if we were to go down that road of providing this service regularly in the future, then having more than one consortium would be beneficial to the ecosystem.
If someone's ineligible, for example, they don't have an ABN, can they apply as a project partner with an eligible lead organisation without any constraints?
Is there any questions around the template or? Sorry, can you repeat that again, Tori? It was.
Sure. If someone's ineligible, for example, if they don't have an ABN, can they apply as a project partner with an eligible lead organisation without any constraints?
I'll pass that to Pete.
Thank you, mate. Yeah, thank you for the question, Gemma. And we also received an email from our contact centre because you did ask that one. So if you still need to actually meet the criteria. So if the lead applicant does not have an eligible ABN, they will not be able to apply. However, they will be able to sit in as a project partner or to sit within the collaboration. So that's no problem at all. So if that particular applicant does not have the ABN, they can still be part of the project as sitting within that project partner or within the collaboration.
Great, thanks, Pete. Will both winners of stage one be expected to follow a similar risk profile, or will they run as mutually exclusive projects?
Our intention is to keep them exclusive. So, of course, if they want to talk to each other, that's their call. But and some of the partners might be on both proposals as well. But we're not going to. We are obviously trying to keep their bid secret to themselves. The agency won't be putting them in the same room and getting them to detail each of their missions out to each other. That's not going to happen. But we definitely will. We'll be working with both groups in some sort of in a fair and equitable manner.
Right. Do you have any specific fuel type that can be used for the rover? For example, batteries, petrol, hydrogen, nuclear?
So once again, for us, we're asking for a certain service to be provided, lunar regolith to the ISAU, and demonstrate reliability. Your fuel type is your choice within the regulatory framework of Australia. So I think we asked a bit at this on the nuclear side of it. If you wanted to propose nuclear, there's nothing in essence stopping you from doing it. But if you didn't put it down as a risk that there's a major regulatory hurdle that you have to climb, that would be a bit of a red flag. But I don't know the regulation around it, but it's just something that you'd have to note.
Setting the mission requirement at 5% chance of failure whilst referring to NASA Class D mission guidelines might seem a bit misaligned.
Yes, so the point of the 5% was to, in some way, impose risk mitigation on you. So we don't want to really stipulate a specific, we don't want a specific plan of risk, how to mitigate risk. It's your proposal on how you want to mitigate that risk. As I discussed, it's very hard to parameterize this risk on such a small mission. So they do things like this for the larger missions, but for the smaller ones, it's quite tough. In essence, it's when you propose your risk approach, you've got to basically justify why you consider this at a reasonable level of 5%. And as I said, if you've come back and said, if you said this is the risk that we can do within the costs, this is the risk plan we can do within the cost and the time frame that will mitigate the risk to the best of the ability, then in essence, I see that requirement will turn into a partial compliance with with the agreed risk strategy that has been put forward. So once again, we want this service to occur. We're trying to articulate the service, and we understand risk is a part of that as well. We want to be reliable and we want to be safe. We have certain milestones that you must pass, and that will be the safety ones that will be with NASA. But we're not going to stipulate and tell you exactly your risk mitigation strategy. That's not going to happen. So you will, it's your proposal on how you want to put it forward, knowing around about what that percentage is, and knowing also what the risk mitigation strategy is that NASA use in the standards. It's your job to sort of filter it together and propose something that you would consider within a reasonable point. Is there any questions on the template? I think you've broken up a little bit, Tori, or is it me?
Classic on mute, so I will repeat for you. The verification of autonomy seems to be setting the bar at quite a high and maybe almost impossible level. Could we just have some more clarification on that?
So the requirements are written as they are today. If you see something as challenging, then you need to bring it up and earmark it pretty close in the proposal and say, this is how I would solve it, but we see that as high risk. This is what I propose to be changed differently. So we are pre-MCR at the moment. These requirements can change, and it will be based off advice that you guys would give. So how the requirements are written is how they're written today. We want everyone to be on the same page when they're proposing, so that everyone's at the same level of difficulty. If there's something that you consider that is going to be too difficult within the time frame, that's completely fine. Put that down. Say this is going to be too difficult. This is what you'd have to do to reach that requirement, and we see this is the reason why it'd be too expensive, but we'd propose it to lower it to this. But still propose something that's going to try and reach that requirement. It might be non-compliant in terms of cost and schedule, but put something down and say why you consider this would be very difficult, and then roll it back and say what we see would be in line with the cost and schedules we have is at this proposal.
So I do have a template question.
Yes.
Following the template, are there any requirements on which systems engineering approach should be used, i.e. following NASA standards?
No. So once again, we are really trying to be quite clear on it is we want a service. We want to stay away from defining what your system will look like. So you are to provide a certain level of service to us, and that's the lunar, the regolith provision service, and the automation demonstration. They're the two services that we need. So one's demonstration, one's actually lunar regolith provision. The rest of it, we've tried to stay out of as much as we can to make it clear. So it's once again, it's up to you.
The question about why should Australian industry have to contribute $10 million in cash when in other countries, other national agencies in Artemis are awarding contracts with no cash contribution?
Look, it's a good question. It's a really good question, and yes, other countries are doing it in different manners. But I think the part that a lot of people do also miss too is that a lot of people are sending stuff to the moon with minimal contribution from the government as well. So I mean, there is some contribution from the government, but a lot of them are actually bringing investors along and doing their missions relatively off venture backed or certain levels of finance from different areas. Think of it in terms of, instead of we need to do this mission, I need my mission fully covered by the government. Think of it more as in, there is a mission that we want to do that's going to fulfill our company, our goals, and the Australian government is providing a significant de-risk of this. A significant, we're talking $50 million plus a free launch to the surface. Now, on that note, by this, I mean, you'll be one of the first countries in the world, first companies in the world who would actually provide that service. Now, if you see that there is no benefit in the future, there is no financial benefit in the future, that's obviously your consortium's discussion. But I'm pretty confident that other consortiums will see a financial benefit in this. And we've seen missions going to the moon who are making financial benefits out of this. Now, the financial benefit might not be today, might not be in the next 5 years, but it might be, in a bit longer term. But think of it more as that we're providing a significant de-risk to the mission that is going on today.
All right, there's a question about, is there a requirement to survive a lunar eclipse environment?
Requirements, I haven't put a requirement down there on the lunar eclipse. Oh, sorry, you're talking about nighttime. So if you've noticed, we haven't put anything around about in the requirements. We've put a minimum time that we expect this to survive. It's clear there's 20 kilos. Surviving a lunar night is very tough. Not very tough, it's near physically impossible. So we haven't asked anyone to survive the lunar night. And you can see in the requirements, we've said just propose something that's going to survive a lunar day. So in essence, it is a 14-day mission. And a lot of the requirements that we'll be discussing with NASA are around about when would we actually land on the surface of the moon, because of how much of the landing time will eat into that lunar day. So we put a minimum lifetime that we would expect for it, which is approximately a lunar day. So to survive the lunar night, no, we have not expected anyone to do that. And with 20 kilos, that was a very quick assessment to see that it's near physically impossible with the power and the batteries, the energy storage we'd have.
Okay, our next question is there any expectation on where the rover will be operated from? That is from Australia, or will NASA do that?
The operations plan and the next steps on that will be in the discussion of stage 1. I mean, our intention is to demonstrate our remote operations capability. So if we do not see operations in Australia, we wouldn't really be demonstrating our operations capability. Though noting the communication system for us is actually through the lander for primary comms we've seen. That's obviously has to be negotiated with the lander directly, but most of the missions that are set up today have their primary comms through the lander itself. Now, once again, communications is a fundamental part of any mission. To be reliant on one system to provide your communications is fraught with risk. So having a separate communication system is something that would be most consortiums would typically consider. Though if NASA's procuring the lander and the lander has its own communication systems, then we have to deal with the communications going through what NASA would want their communications to go through. And then there will be a relatively reasonable discussion with NASA on what would work for our industry and what not. So it's in essence your proposal, but there is a big discussion that has to happen around this, but that will only occur once the procurement for the lander happens. So it's up to you how you want to propose it. And once again, one of the key objectives is to demonstrate our remote operations capability.
Is the philosophy of models imposed brackets engineering model, qualification model, flight model, etc.?
No, so you have certain gates you need to pass. So the gates are that there's going to be a safety review to ensure that you're not going to break something that's up there. That's a big one. And then there's also the launcher to ensure that you can go on the launcher. So these are things that you would need to do, and your model philosophy is your call. The only thing we have stipulated for you is that you need to have a demonstration model by the end of stage 1. So some of your money must be put into a rover, a demonstration rover that would be done by stage 1, and that's primarily to de-risk certain things, because it's great to look at all the paper studies, but it's way simpler if you come in and say, this is what we're going to do and this is how it works, look at it. But of course, what that philosophy behind that is your call as well. So you'd have to have a justification on how this is de-risking your actual mission. So we wouldn't want to see someone just get an Arduino board and put it forward and say, look, this de-risks it, but it has the electronics and software and all hardware is different from the actual system. That would be, so it is something that would intend to de-risk the overall mission. But how you de-risk it is your call. So it might be only certain aspects of that. It wouldn't be de-risk the whole thing. But model philosophy, your call.
How and when does the Australian Space Agency plan to handle the communication between NASA and their successful consortiums in stage 1 for rover requirements?
Could you just repeat that again? It was a bit crackled.
Sure. How and when does the Australian Space Agency plan to handle the communication between NASA and the successful consortiums in stage 1 for rover requirements?
The exact methodology will be discussed with the 2 recipients, but it will be done in a fair and equitable manner. So will the consortium winners obviously meet and discuss with NASA? Most likely, yes. We will also be discussing, the Australian Space Agency will be discussing regularly, and we are discussing regularly with NASA already. But we'll sit and discuss that with the stage 1 applicants, the stage 1 successful recipients. But once again, it will be done in a fair and equitable manner. So we have constraints to ensure that that if we're providing support or advice to one of the groups, then we also must provide the equal opportunity to the other group too. And one of those supports would also be including NASA. The ability to discuss and talk missions with NASA. So we just need to also have that in consideration. So, but we'll discuss that with stage 1 applicants and successful applicants, the best approach. But we have an approach there that we'll be putting forward.
Great. The Australian Space Agency expects respondents to have a side hustle while the customer, really NASA, not the Australian Space Agency, is not offering a contract to Australian organisations. Will this change?
So I'm just trying to make sure I understand the question. It's related. People are expecting that NASA would provide a contract to the Australian space ecosystem. Is that how I understand?
I think so.
So, look, how you get contracts and how your company gets contracts is your call. I'm only detailing what this mission is and how we are with the finance and the launch to the system, launch to the moon. So the service to the moon, how that is going to de-risk this. If you're looking for certain contracts, that are out there today, or for future one, it's sort of outside the scope of this program. This program is purely about giving the opportunity to a consortium to get one of their assets on the lunar surface and demonstrate their capability to the world. Any questions on the template at all? Nope. I spent a lot of time on that template.
It's great. Has the Australian Space Agency done any analysis of how many applicants they expect out of the industry, considering the 10 million is quite a large amount?
So I'm guessing we're talking about stage 1 applicants and not stage 2, because it should be 2 for stage 2. But the stage 1, we're expecting not we're not expecting the same as the demonstrator program, which had 79 applications. There is $1 million buy-in from here. So in essence, we're expecting, in the order of a handful level, would be that side. And actually, it's one of the reasons why there is some co-funding there, is that we didn't want 100 applications coming in for the first round. The co-funding obviously demonstrates that this is something that the companies are interested in, but at the same time, it brings it down to about, it brings it down to a handful, which is what expected.
When will specific launch vehicle profile information be known for shock and vibe testing?
When the lander is procured, and that will be done by NASA.
Is there any flexibility on the stage 1 application submission deadline?
Is there any flexibility? No. 28th of February, that's the date. But I will state this, there are, if there's some technical problems, and this is definitely on Pete's side, if there's some technical problems when submitting it on the 28th, don't hesitate to give them a call. There are ways to deal with it, but Pete, I'll follow on from here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually do encourage people to put their applications, start their applications. A lot of people work outside of the system, and then they'll actually go into the portal and complete their application closer to the due date. We always advise and encourage people not to leave it to the last moment, just in case there are some system errors. But if there is system errors for whatever reason, and you're missing the deadline at 5 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, we actually encourage you to take screenshots of the error and contact our business contact centre immediately.
Great, thanks, Pete. Will there be a highlight of sustainable technologies throughout the program?
Of sustainable technologies throughout the program. So I've asked in the proposal template for you to earmark quite quickly what the long lead items are, and also the critical technologies that you're expecting to de-risk. We haven't put any sustainability requirements on this from our side at the moment. So the sustainability approach is related to the regulation that we have in the Australian ecosystem. So you need to pass the Australian regulation that we have for export control, and typically sustainability is actually managed through this and less through the program guidelines. So you must be conformed to the regulation environment that we have to date, and any sustainability aspects will be through there.
When are lander and ISRU facility SRR and PDR scheduled? In the event that they are not held before the end of stage 1, would you consider extending stage 1?
We'll cross that bridge when we get there. So the timelines on the other side is also, it's the same with us if you think about it. If someone asked us when our PDR exactly was, I've said to you, you propose when it is. So the exact date of our PDR is not 100% known. The dates in the agreements, which is the MCR and the SRR, is to match up to what's on the NASA side. But of course, there's always uncertainty on dates and passing that. So we'll if there are delays here, we'll discuss it with the stage 1 winners to discuss the way forward from there as well. So can't give you a direct answer on that, unfortunately. So, but it's still it's just a typical thing that we have to manage in most missions.
Are applicants expected to have a backup launch option, or will the Australian Space Agency provide for it in case of a launch or landing failure?
So a launch or a lander failure, that is a risk that was obviously brought up at the beginning. Look, you're not going to be reimbursed if the rocket blows up or the lander doesn't work. That won't happen. That's a risk that you need to figure out how to mitigate and manage yourself. To what happens for future funding, right now the funding is what it is. I won't say that we can't have it in the future, but right now the funding is the 50 million. So there's always a risk that the rocket and lander have some failures. And specifically, if you're on the program we have today, most of the landers have actually not landed on the moon yet. By 2026, we expect that a few of them definitely will. So mitigating that risk, but to say that we'll refund it if that occurs, it won't happen.
Great. Well, thank you, Campbell, for answering the questions that have come through. We will wrap up there for today. Any future questions, that there'll be slides coming up as well. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. We're very much looking forward to working with you to grow the Australian space industry. As I said, for further information, please head to www.industry.gov.au or contact the Business Grants Hub for any of your unanswered questions. A recording of this presentation will be made available on the agency's YouTube channels and other social media pages. Thank you everyone for your time today, and we'll see you on the moon.